Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And just as a sort of homage to the Minister, I will start my speech the same way he did, by saying that I'm indeed the designated Speaker for the official opposition on this motion. Honourable Speaker, the Liberal government announced this project last December, final phase, announced the project. We had a session in the spring. February, didn't raise it. March, didn't raise it. In April, we raised it. Asked the Minister about it in estimates. He'll recall the debate he did. You know, he was there. Didn't do it in May. The last day of the session, they had an emergency ministerial statement where they announced that in October, they were going to bring it forward to the House for debate. So we know, well, a ministerial statement by definition, is that actually the minister might want to review, you know, the basic rules of his job. But in any event, Honourable Speaker, the minister did all that, so we know what today is, Honourable Speaker. It's the government being the government. I mean, this is the day where they added to red tape and laws by introducing a law saying they were proud of eliminating red tape. This is the government we're talking about. Yesterday, we heard government members celebrating the Auditor General for Local Government and saying, absolutely there should be regulatory processes and oversight. And today, they have a motion that says, we don't care about regulatory authority and oversight, Honourable Speaker. They will say anything, they will do anything, Honourable Speaker, but everybody in British Columbia knows. Everybody in British Columbia now knows that we can do better than the minister just did in this House, Honourable Speaker. On BC Hydro, which is what we're talking about today, and the minister will recall the conclusions of our estimates, Honourable Speaker. BC Hydro, over the last number of years under Liberal administration, is in chaos, Honourable Speaker. I mean, it was their reviews, their urgent reports, their hiring of Mr. Dybel and others to go in and try and save the situation, Honourable Speaker. They have spent the last good part of a decade avoiding the law with respect to the BCUC. Burrard Thermal, they didn't listen to the BCUC. Minister didn't refer to Burrard Thermal. That's 900 megawatts of capacity down the drain, Honourable Speaker. 900 megawatts of capacity down the drain, contrary, Honourable Speaker, contrary to the opinion of the BCUC. Of course he didn't discuss that, Honourable Speaker, as an option, because, Honourable Speaker, it wasn't yellowed out in the report, Honourable Speaker. The Honourable Speaker, on smart meters, they made all kinds of commitments on smart meters that have disappeared. $1 billion investment taken away from the BCUC, Honourable Speaker. The Green Energy Plan, Honourable Speaker, otherwise known as No Liberal Lobbyists Left Behind, Honourable Speaker, exempted from the BCUC, Honourable Speaker. The Northwest Transmission Line, Honourable Speaker, exempted from BCUC review. The IT plan, they didn't exempt that. They simply didn't tell the BCUC the truth about it, Honourable Speaker. That's what we've discovered over the last number of months, Honourable Speaker. That's what we discovered. Those were the conclusions of estimates, Honourable Speaker, and generally the minister's response when I put these things to him was, gosh, I agree, but we'll do better in the future, Honourable Speaker. What's the consequence of that, though? Because we have to understand what the consequences of it are. The decisions that the government has made, their decisions on the interior lower mainland line, yet another over budget, Honourable Speaker. Their decisions on Northwest Transmission, their decisions on DCAT, also over budget, Honourable Speaker. Their decisions on all these questions that they have exempted are being felt today by every ratepayer, every renter, every homeowner, every small business, every medium-sized business, and every industrial user. In fact, Honourable Speaker, their 28% rate increases caused by Liberal policies, caused by policies where they said, we know better, we don't have to prove our case. We don't have to show the facts to the people of BC. We don't have to follow the law and go to the BCUC. It's the taxpayer, the ratepayer, who has paid the price for this incompetence at BC Hydro. Now, people say, how could this possibly happen? Like, on all of this list of projects, how could the Minister of Energy, who seems like some of the time at least an affable fellow, Honourable Speaker, maybe all of the time, an affable fellow, how could he be so wrong all the time? How could he be wrong on billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of projects, Honourable Speaker? Well, I think the only answer to that question, and I know it's unfair, Honourable Speaker, and as soon as I do it, I'm going to regret having done it, Honourable Speaker. As soon as I say it, I'm going to regret having done it. But I think the only thing we can do at this point is to quote the minister himself, Honourable Speaker. So, what did the minister say about Site C? He said, and the BCUC, it wasn't what he said in the House today, he was a version of it, I suppose. He said, I wouldn't characterize, we're talking about a $9 billion project that they exempted from regulatory review. I wouldn't characterize my view of the Site C project as one of confidence. Well, that makes me feel better. Honourable Speaker, I'm not confident. I'm just the guy. He, when asked putting Site C to a regulatory review would get in the way of the provincial government's energy plans, he said, quote, that would have exposed these projects to the intervenor process that we have at the BCUC. People would have actually been able to ask questions and to challenge the government's assumptions under oath according to the law. So when the minister says that, that is what he's saying. He says, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what the proposal is. I decide, and I'm not going to follow the law. It doesn't matter what it said in the Liberal platform again and again and again. It didn't matter what the former leader and the current leader of the Liberal Party said about the BCUC. That's all in the past. We've made all of these mistakes, and I'm the minister, and I'm planning to repeat them, Honourable Speaker. So how does he do it? Well, what's his decision-making process? Because I think people, when they again see the political debate, they probably think the minister talked about the rigorous debate in caucus that his members had and the rigorous debate in cabinet, Honourable Speaker. Fortunately, the minister, in a rare moment of clarity, a rare moment of insight, he let us in on how they make these sorts of decisions when he talked about the Northwest Transmission Line, Honourable Speaker. Here's what he said. I'm quoting the minister again. Again, Honourable Speaker, it seems unfair, and yet I'm doing it. I will share with you what I think happened with the Northwest Transmission Line. Back many years ago, when then Premier Campbell decided we were going to build that line, and it was a courageous decision on his part, he needed a number to use when he was announcing this. I think Hydro came out with a very preliminary number. Typically what they do is they'll come out with a number and they'll say it could be 50% higher or 30% lower. That's the kind of number that came out, Honourable Speaker. Well, as the minister knows, that is the number that they put in their budget. That is the number they put in BC Hydro's public information. And that is the number, Honourable Speaker, that clearly this minister and the government didn't believe in at the time. So when you want an insight into their processes, and I cut short his tribute to Premier Campbell there just for the sake of the minister.
Well, we know the minister.
But when you want an insight into their processes, that's the insight you need. That they needed a number, and they came up with a number. And you can do that if you don't follow the law and go to the BCUC, and you can't do that if you have to go to the BCUC and answer questions under oath. And that's why they decided, and that's why they're down this road one more time. Even after a BCUC review, they're going down that road one more time. It was this government, Honourable Speaker, that committed to using the BCUC on these very projects, and they broke their word to the voters of BC again and again and again, and the voters of BC have paid the price again and again and again. Now, Honourable Speaker, the minister talked about hydro's estimate of cost in that context, and to use what we'll call it the Minister of Energy doctrine of plus 50 minus 30, he sort of narrowed the cost of the project between $6 billion and $14 billion through that ministerial formula, Honourable Speaker. In any event, Honourable Speaker, he has, in fact, over time, we've seen the increase of the project since the previous Premier, his friend, Mr. Campbell, announced it, Honourable Speaker, increased by approximately 33%, and that means $2.3 billion, if you're keeping track at home, Honourable Speaker. And who believes after this litany, Honourable Speaker, of overruns on the Northwest Transmission Line, on ILM, on all the major projects combined and cumulatively, if you add that and DCAT, Honourable Speaker, we're talking about overruns of close to $1 billion. Who believes them anymore? I mean, we could have believed them if they'd gone to the BCUC on Northwest Transmission. They chose not to do that. They've exempted themselves, as they have in this case, Honourable Speaker. But we know from the minister's own analysis of Liberal policies and Liberal strategies here that they picked a number, they found a number, and now, Honourable Speaker, they are trying to sell a number, a new number, Honourable Speaker, in terms of costs. Now, Honourable Speaker, we know, and it's not just this project, other projects go over budget, Honourable Speaker. We know, Honourable Speaker, for example, that back east, the Muskrat project, for example, that project, of course, went through financial reviews, as they do these size projects in most jurisdictions, and this is with a contractor currently on the short list for BC Hydro, Honourable Speaker, going massively over budget, Honourable Speaker. But in that case, Honourable Speaker, at least, Honourable Speaker, they had a project that went through a financial review and had an oversight committee, something they don't have in this case, Honourable Speaker, to deal with it. So compare that and this, Honourable Speaker. 1,100 megawatt Site C project, Honourable Speaker, an estimated cost of $8.9 billion, has undergone no public financial reviews. I repeat, no public financial reviews. It's not subject to any oversight committee, and the province of BC is guaranteeing the debt for 70 years, Honourable Speaker. That's what they're doing. 70 years. This government of contractual obligations of tens of billions of dollars at BC Hydro, and they're doing it one more time. The only transmission, and this is different than Muskrat, Honourable Speaker, included in the Site C budget is the link to BC Hydro's Peace Canyon project, which is about 90 kilometres away, Honourable Speaker. How you get it from there to market is anyone's guess and not included in any event in the cost, Honourable Speaker. BC taxpayers won't know, because of this minister and this process, won't know of cost overruns, Honourable Speaker, until the project is completed. And the responsible individuals will be long gone, maybe back in Ontario, Honourable Speaker, telling stories of the good old days in the Kootenays. In any event, Honourable Speaker, all we can say, Honourable Speaker, about this situation is that the government has proven itself at BC Hydro again and again and again not to be credible on the issue of costs. And yet here we are, a motion saying, trust us. We failed you every time before, but trust us now. Now, Honourable Speaker, the second question, I guess, is, do we need the power? Do we need this amount of power in this way now, Honourable Speaker? Now, again, what we have is a government that has failed and continues to fail, Honourable Speaker, to be straightforward with British Columbians, Honourable Speaker. The last public forecast, the one referred to in the minister's speech, was from 2012. It was the basis of the 2013 IRP, Honourable Speaker. That is the last forecast. It used to be the case, Honourable Speaker, that they would come out with such forecasts every year. But in the lead up to the Site C decision, suddenly that disappeared. Even though people at BC Hydro tell me, and surely they tell the minister, Honourable Speaker, that in fact those forecasts are in serious jeopardy. In fact, this year, and I'm just, again, unfairly reading from government materials and BC Hydro's materials, Honourable Speaker, there is a reduction, an actual reduction in domestic tariff sales of 320 GWH, Honourable Speaker. That's about a quarter of Site C, Honourable Speaker. That's how much it was reduced this year under this government, Honourable Speaker. Over the last 10 years, industrial demand has actually dropped significantly in British Columbia. Heavens, if we hadn't had such a pro-business government, Honourable Speaker. And in fact, Honourable Speaker, they have been consistently wrong, consistently overestimating demand, and now they overestimate demand and are trying to put forward this project, Honourable Speaker. So the question is, I guess, do we need the power? And the answer is, BC Hydro won't give us the information, but just about everybody, from consumer groups to seniors groups, Honourable Speaker, to the business community, says that they don't, and they are afraid that what will happen here is exactly what happened the last time they exempted themselves of the BCUC, is that they'll be caught holding the bill for a huge mistake by the BC Liberal government. Again, if the government has confidence in its numbers, which they're currently hiding from the public, why don't they take them to the BCUC and show them? They don't, Honourable Speaker. Now, Honourable Speaker, it's an interesting question, Honourable Speaker. And even BC Hydro's own model, imagine its own model, they couldn't, I guess, wash through the document dramatically enough. What it shows is, and it's in the Integrated Resource Plan, it may or may not have been yellowed out since it's bad news. It probably wasn't yellowed in the briefing note, Honourable Speaker, but it showed, Honourable Speaker, that note, Chapter 6, deals with Site C, shows that BC Hydro would save about $250 million if the service date for Site C was deferred from 2024 to 2026. That's not me saying it. That's BC Hydro saying it. That's $250 million. Imagine what the people of BC could do with $250 million, Honourable Speaker. And this is after the model was cooked to favour Site C, Honourable Speaker. So the question, I guess, Honourable Speaker, and I will happily share that information with the Minister, who I know will be listening carefully in any event, in Hansard, Honourable Speaker. The Honourable Speaker, we go on to this question of needing the power and what's the best option. I asked the Minister when he was speaking about Burrard Thermal. The government rejected the BCUC's advice, it rejected common sense, Honourable Speaker, because this is a backup for our system, Honourable Speaker. What we need, Honourable Speaker, is capacity. That's what BC Hydro says. We will need capacity by 2020, Honourable Speaker. And what they did was they got rid of that capacity. Now, they also, Honourable Speaker, the Minister shelved the Revelstoke 6 project at the same time. Now, the Minister says it's not true. I guess, Honourable Speaker, the Minister, Honourable Speaker, thinks that deferring a project till 2033 isn't shelving it, Honourable Speaker. But in any event, Honourable Speaker, he shelved Revelstoke 6, Honourable Speaker. Now, what does Revelstoke 6 bring, Honourable Speaker? What does it bring? It brings about half the capacity, which is what BC Hydro says it needs, as a Site C project. For according to BC Hydro, and I got this off their website again today, indeed, it's unfair to read their website. I'm glad I can at this point, Honourable Speaker, because you'll recall, Honourable Speaker, the Minister will recall having discussed his IT plan with us in the House that the Minister and the government went 900% over budget on a website upgrade. And I don't think that worked very well, Honourable Speaker. But I was able to access the website today. Only 900%, Honourable Speaker. I think, Honourable Speaker, if we were to apply a Liberal bell curve to that, that might not be bad, Honourable Speaker. In any event, off their website today, and what does it say, Honourable Speaker? What does it say? 500 megawatts of capacity, about 45% of what Site C can bring, for $420 million. What? Wow. For $420 million. So we need capacity. And just remember, Revelstoke 6 adds to an existing footprint at Revelstoke. It would create jobs, Honorable Speaker. It would save ratepayers money, Honorable Speaker. It would be done under the Allied Hydro Council Agreement, according to the BC Hydro website, Honorable Speaker. It wouldn't put at risk any agricultural land, Honorable Speaker, or raise any issues with First Nations. And the minister shelved it. And the only reason he shelved it, Honorable Speaker, is because if you did this, you couldn't do Site C. If you spent the $420 million, you couldn't spend the $8.775 billion. And I guess that looks like a bigger number, and it is, in a press release. But it doesn't feel so good when you're a ratepayer having to pay the price. Is there a business case? When the minister and the premier shelved Revelstoke 6 in favor of Site C, shelved the less expensive project, more efficient project, for the more expensive project that will cost ratepayers and cost jobs, Honorable Speaker. Was there a business case for this? Did they produce a business case for this? Is there one they could show the BCUC or this House or the opposition? Surely the minister or the Liberal MLAs will raise that in the debate and show us the model they used. These numbers are big numbers, Honorable Speaker. I mean, imagine, as I happen to do from time to time, I'm involved in organizing socials at a church. And you had the choice, Honorable Speaker, between buying the 20 loaves of bread you needed for, say, I don't know, if there's more expensive, we get a nice bulk rate, but say $30. Or, Honorable Speaker, you could do what the minister, Revelstoke 6 isn't green electricity? Of course it is, Honorable Speaker. Of course it is. BC Hydro, Honorable Speaker, the minister's saying it's not green electricity. BC Hydro says it is, right here on its website that's working today, Honorable Speaker. It's working today, Honorable Speaker, so I was able to access that today. So it's green electricity. So if the minister was at your church and he was organizing a luncheon and he was making sandwiches and he wanted to order and we needed 20 loaves of bread because, you know, it's a United Church and we're a smaller church, Honorable Speaker, and what he would propose, Honorable Speaker, is if you need 20 loaves of bread, which you could buy for $30, he'd say, well, let's buy 55 loaves of bread and let's pay $700. That's what he is talking about here. And if he wants to test that analysis before the BC Utilities Commission, I invite him to do so. But the fact of the matter is that Burrard and Revelstoke 6 have more capacity in Site C, and capacity is what BC Hydro needs. And we're talking about, according to the minister, $9 billion, according to the minister's formula, up to $14 billion for this project. Honorable Speaker, that's what we're talking about. And you know what would happen if the minister proposed to spend $600 instead of $30 at the church and someone complained? You know what he'd say? Oh, it's about leadership, Honorable Speaker. It's about leadership. That's what he'd say. It's about leadership. I don't want my views questioned. I don't want to follow the rules and have my views questioned. We're buying the gold-plated bread, Honorable Speaker. That's what he would say. We're not going to go to the BCUC, as we repeatedly promised to do, Honorable Speaker. That is, Honorable Speaker, the gist of the minister's position on that question. And then, Honorable Speaker, there are other options, of course. Revelstoke 6 is simply one of the options facing, that's available to the government. And the minister talked about having reviewed all the options. As he said, reviewed all the options. Essentially, Honorable Speaker, that meant he reviewed one option that he wanted to proceed with, and option B, which was really lousy. And what he discovered was option A was better. He created this false debate. He didn't talk about Burrard. He didn't talk about Revelstoke 6. He didn't look at what's happening in the energy industry, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, he would be the kind of guy who would say, you know, I'm going to buy a cell phone for the next 10 years, Honorable Speaker, ignoring the circumstances in the market. And again, Honorable Speaker, again, he can test that out. If he disagrees with my view of things, he can test that out by referring this $9 to $14 billion budget, according to the Minister of Energy's doctrine, it could be that high, 50% more, 30% less. He could test that out by going to the BCUC and answering the questions of BC business and answering the questions of BC small business and seniors groups and consumers, groups that he describes in here as not worthy of having their voice heard about the future of energy policy in BC, and which, regardless of that, Honourable Speaker, is in fact the law, Honourable Speaker, in British Columbia. So he could do that, Honourable Speaker, and he has chosen not to do that. And I think, Honourable Speaker, that's why we're here today. Because this is the way the government does business. They want to do something, and it doesn't matter what the rules are, they're going to do it because, as the minister says, as the government says, you know, we won't be paying the bills, there won't be an impact on energy rates till 2024 or 25 or 26 when it's finished. They put forward numbers that are not credible, Honourable Speaker. You know, in the courts, they're before the courts right now, Honourable Speaker, on Site C. On this very day we're debating it, Honourable Speaker. And here's what they say before the courts. They say, Honourable Speaker, that a year's delay has a total cost impact of Site C of, quote, $335 million, Honourable Speaker. Now, that's very interesting, a year's delay, Honourable Speaker, because Site C, in the original plan, the Campbell Minister of Energy plan, was supposed to be completed by 2020. And it was supposed to cost $7.9 billion. A year's delay is $335 million, and yet, as of last year, the cost, when it's 2024, this is what they're telling the courts, was still $7.9 billion. And they have shown none of this as a basis for changing their assessment of the project. They found a number that they like, and they're going to stick to it, Honourable Speaker, until the bills come in and ratepayers have to pay, Honourable Speaker. And they have done this, as we say, again and again and again, avoiding, disinterested in other options, disinterested in considering seriously other proposals and other options that would create more jobs, Honourable Speaker. So yes, jobs too, because it costs jobs, Honourable Speaker, when you have 28% rate increases we have now. It costs families because they can't afford to do the things they need to do. It costs small businesses because they can't afford to bring on new workers. It costs our major industrial businesses when they try and compete internationally. The cost of similar Liberal decisions in the past that they failed to take to the BC Utilities Commission, Honourable Speaker. Those cost jobs too. When you decide on the $9 billion option instead of the $450 million option, Honourable Speaker, that costs jobs too. When you have a project that's amortized over 70 years and you're arguing for a flat, no improvement in technology over that time, that costs jobs too, Honourable Speaker. When you turn down projects like Revelstoke 6, and I know it's unfair, and the member for Surrey Wally is very unhappy that I am quoting from the minister's documents again. But I have to do it, Honourable Speaker.
Please, no.
I have to do it. Here's what their document says today, and my colleague from Vancouver Hastings will be speaking to this. Construction work for the Revelstoke Unit 6 project would be completed by independent contractors through several large contracts that would be awarded according to BC Hydro's procurement policies. Under an agreement with the Allied Hydro Council, Honourable Speaker, workers for the projects would be hired through the Columbia Hydro Constructors Agreement that includes provisions to support local and equity hire. It's right on their website, Honourable Speaker. They've rejected this notion. It's right on their website as something to celebrate. The Revelstoke Unit 5 project hired over 380 person-years of trades work under the CHC agreement. Of these, 33% were local hires and 6% were First Nation hires. The Revelstoke 6 project was expected to similarly create 390 person-years of direct employment, Honourable Speaker. So this is what we have. We need capacity, according to BC Hydro, and they're delaying capacity, Honourable Speaker. That's what we need, capacity by 2020. That's what your report says, Honourable Speaker. And so they have decided, because they could get Revelstoke done and in place for that time, to delay it, Honourable Speaker. They created the need for that capacity by shutting down Burrard. And now they want to spend without any review, Honourable Speaker. Nonsense. It has no impact on BC Hydro's system. I mean, no one takes the minister's comments seriously in this regard, Honourable Speaker. No one takes them seriously. And so I would say, Honourable Speaker, and my colleagues who will take part in this debate, Honourable Speaker, my colleagues who will take part in this debate as we vote against a motion, Honourable Speaker, that's misinformed, Honourable Speaker. Vote against a motion that's incorrect, Honourable Speaker. Vote against a motion that takes us down the same path that the Liberal government took us in all these projects that after the election they told us were going to cost us so much on our hydro bills and hurt the competitiveness of British Columbia, Honourable Speaker. That is, Honourable Speaker, the reality of what has happened here. That is the reality of what has happened here, Honourable Speaker. But in addition to all of that, there are other issues. I mean, if you could, Honourable Speaker, create more jobs, would you do it? I think most people would say the answer is yes. The Liberal government doesn't care to find out. Can you get the same amount of capacity significantly cheaper? And we know you can because BC Hydro says you can. We should try and find out. But the Liberal government doesn't want to know, Honourable Speaker. Ignorance is not a defense of public policy. Deliberately avoiding the facts is not a defense of public policy. And I remind people, the members opposite, that the consequences for people in the region, the consequences for the environment, the consequences for First Nations, the consequences for agriculture are serious. And my colleagues in this House, Honourable Speaker, are going to speak in detail to those questions over in the course of this debate. But there is an option to avoid those consequences, or at least to put those issues to the BC Utilities Commission. That's what we would do. That's what we believe in. We think BC Hydro and the government, after failure, after failure, after failure, after overrun, after overrun, after overrun, should do what's right. If they have the courage of their convictions, they should take their case to the BCUC and see what that kind of review would show. They should not do 5-page reports on the economic value of a $9 billion project and say we've consulted, Honourable Speaker. Instead, they should show the business case that says this makes more sense than Revelstoke 6. They should show the business case that says, Honourable Speaker, it makes more sense than Burrard. They should show the business case, Honourable Speaker, that says it makes more sense than other projects, clean energy projects around BC. They should show that business case, but they don't want to because they already know the answer. And all they want is political stunts like this. They know they're not going to be around when we have to pay the price for these mistakes. And they don't want to make the case now. So as an opposition, we will be voting clearly and unequivocally against a motion, against this political stunt by the government. And we will again implore the government, for the future of BC, for our children, for the region, for First Nations, for agriculture, Honourable Speaker, for business community, for jobs, to come to their senses, Honourable Speaker, and refer this project to the BC Utilities Commission.